So, tip number one to be able to stop at 5 is going to be serve yourself less food. If you're serving yourself a fist-sized portion to start with, you're going to be less likely to eat past a 5 if, in fact, you're starting at a 0. Now, if you're not starting at a 0, here's the truth of it. It's pretty tough to find 5 when you haven't started at empty. So if that describes you, start there. Start with empty. Start with 0, and then I think it'll be a little easier to find 5. All right. So in the past, if I was going to have breakfast cereal, some of us do eat breakfast cereal for breakfast, I suppose, and some of us might eat it at other times. But in the past, I would probably have given myself a serving size, which we all know is 1 bowl. Okay? Now, with our revised or renewed or brand new commitment to 0 to 5 eating, we realize that this is probably more than I need to eat. And if it's not, if this is what I need to eat, I'll find that out another way. I'm not going to start with this, though. Okay, so let's look at what I'm going to start with. Okay, cereal's back in the box. You know, Lucky Charms, magically delicious. Instead of a bowl, and I don't use this for ice cream either, I'm going to use a mug or a cup. And this is what I would start with. And I only picked this because I think breakfast cereal is one of the most common foods that people use to eat. They at times when you wouldn't expect it. I just am guessing. Okay. So, my first portion, and ideally my only portion, is going to be a cup. And it's not even going to come all the way up to the top. Just by way of comparison, if I were to put this in my bowl, it's not even half a bowl. So I'm right there cutting back my portion size. Now, once you've got your cup of cereal, you fill it with milk, and it will take less milk too. So you'll have less milk coming into your system. Okay, so that's tip number one, is serve yourself less food. That's one of the best ways to be able to discover 5. Serve yourself less food, fist portion or less, okay? And that may seem like next to no food. And some of us are saying, well, but goodness sakes, I'm going to eat that in 30 seconds, and I'm still going to want to eat. This is very common, so there are some ways to deal with it. The second tip, in fact, to stopping at 5 is slow down. How can we slow down? There's a couple ways of slowing down that have worked for me. Perhaps they'll work for you. And feel free to add your comment about other ways of slowing down in the comments here at this post. Okay. One of the ways to slow down after I've poured my milk into my cereal is use your non-dominant hand to feed yourself with. Okay, so I'm right-handed. So maybe after a while you would learn how to eat with your left hand or your non-dominant hand successfully, but during the time that it takes you to train your left hand, you're also training yourself to slow down because you are a willing participant in this process. You want to be trained to slow down. So I'm assuming that in the time that it takes you to learn how to eat efficiently and quickly with your non-dominant hand, left hand for me in this case, you are also training yourself to slow down. So that is one way of slowing down. Another way of slowing down is any food that you eat, whether it's tacos or hamburgers or pizza, any food that you might normally eat with your hands, use silverware to eat it. And even if it's tacos, use knife and fork to cut up the tortilla, and you'll slow down a lot more when you don't just use your hands. We use our hands a lot in our society, it seems like, to eat. And it does mean we are more able to shovel food in more quickly. So to slow down, we have to be willing to use some of these strategies because some of us won't think to slow down otherwise. So using silverware for any food, and 2, use your non-dominant hand. A third way to slow down will be to make your meal a worship experience where you're worshiping the Lord, okay? And I know this may sound a little extreme, but it can be an an awesome experience, actually. If Scripture says, as it does, that whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God, then it stands to reason that whether I'm eating or drinking, I should be able to give God glory in that time, not just with my obedience, which I do believe does give him honor and glory and worship, but also with the intentionality of my thinking. I can, as I'm enjoying my magically delicious food, I can wonder at the variety of textures. A marbot compared to the little sugar-covered oat fishy thingy, and the contrast between them, or whatever I might be eating. Textures are one of the most wonderful things about eating, and as we eat our food, we can give God glory for the taste, for the texture, and for the source of the food, for instance. I mean, I wondered the other day about sugar cane and how, God didn't have to create plants that had a naturally sweet flavor. Honey, he didn't have to create honey. And so it's kind of a neat experience as you're eating to consider the source of the food, the texture of the food, the flavor of the food, giving God glory as the creator, as the one who provided it, and worshiping him as a part of that. Proclaiming his gifts, yes, but looking to him as the giver of those gifts. So walking in gratitude with a humble heart, even as you're eating. Another way to slow down when you're eating with your silverware and with your left hand is in between your bites with your offhand. Set your silverware down and get a sip of whatever beverage you're drinking with your meal. This, too, will slow your eating down. And if you're with people, setting your silverware down, getting your drink, conversing, and then taking another bite, setting your silverware down. It doesn't have to look like a great big hairy deal like I might be making it sound, but you can kind of find a rhythm and a way to slow down. And you're eating a smaller portion anyway, so slowing down is going to be kind of a gift to yourself. It'll last longer that way. If you eat a smaller portion as quickly as we are prone to do normally, we're going to be done so quickly, we will feel ripped off. Okay, we don't want to do that. We don't want to feel that way. And so eating half as much, twice as slow, is going to cause us to feel more contentment with the amount we ate because we will know we've been obedient. Our stomachs will have a chance to signal our brain, we've had enough food. Okay, so you might want to have a secondary boundary for yourself that says no seconds. And the reason I suggest that is because at first, especially at first, we eat fast enough that we think we're not satisfied yet. And it does take our stomachs a while to signal our brains, supposedly 20 minutes, before our brains get the signal that we don't need any more food. So certainly, if you're still hungry after 20 minutes, get another portion, another smaller even portion that may not take very much. Another tip for finding 5 is be sure you don't have open cereal boxes on your counter or on the table. You don't want any open food accessible when you're sitting down to your meal or as you walk through your kitchen or past a favorite counter or whatever. Bags of chips, you don't want to have them open. I suggest using a clip or even masking tape to shut it. I'm not beyond doing that. While it is permissible to eat any food, not all foods are beneficial. Not all food. We don't want to be mastered by any food, so you'll want to be sure that those foods are kept in closed containers where you're not going to be more tempted to reach into them and grab more food than you need in order to reach your 5. Okay, so how to find 5? First tip was serve yourself less food to start with. Another tip is to slow down, and we talked about several ways to do that. A third tip is be sure that you do not go back for seconds or having those open containers, even platters, main dishes, side dishes, salads, whatever, on the table where you're eating. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend having them on a counter in the kitchen where everybody who wants seconds will get up and go get themselves seconds. You don't have to do it that way, in which case you can put a cover over it on your table. By any means, if your husband or kids want access to the food more readily, I don't want you to cause a World War III in your own family. So consider another way to cover those items so that they're both out of sight, and you have to go through a process of actually opening something to get seconds. But I recommend, for those of us committed to stopping at 5, we not have as a secondary boundary not having seconds unless you wait 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you'll know if you're still hungry. And remember, you can eat if you're hungry. In fact, please do, unless you feel God directing you otherwise for some reason. So those are the main tips for stopping at 5.